We continue to monitor the tropics. Now's the perfect time because it's going to be a hyperactive season coming up in August through September. You need to prepare. But navigating insurance costs and policies can be very tricky and overwhelming for most people because when it comes to hurricanes, your home insurance may not be enough. Take it from me, you never know. Today on Fox Weather, we are breaking it all down for you, so we're going to keep yourself and your family safe and aware for this hurricane season. Let's bring in Fox Business Network contributor Scott Martin. He is with us. And Scott, it's always great to talk to you, my friend. Give us your best tips if you live in a hurricane-prone area right now.
Yes, do everything you can, Bob, to prepare. I mean, preparation is key. Is not only, like you mentioned, with regards to getting the policies that will cover you, which we'll talk about those little kind of idiosyncratics with regards to what's going on in the insurance industry with hurricanes. But, Bob, also take care of your home. I mean, check the windows, check the hurricane shutters, check the area around your house. Just make sure that you basically fortify as much as you possibly can your home for a potential storm that's coming because, as you mentioned as well with myself, I mean, I've got a place down in Florida, unfortunately in Captiva, that got nailed by Ian. And frankly, we were not totally prepared, Bob, from a physical standpoint, despite the insurance of how the home was prepared for the terrible impact that Hurricane Ian gave us a couple years ago.
Yeah, I mean, I remember that one. That was a terrible storm. I mean, it just ravaged that part of the coastline and it went all the way up and flooded out portions of lower parts of Georgia as well. But I mean, here's a new wrinkle in the whole thing, Scott, too. We're talking about the companies that are starting to cut back from providing insurance for residents in disaster-prone areas. What should the residents do in case that happens to them?
Yes, so you got to have a good insurance broker. And for us too, Bob, we lost, so after Hurricane Ian came through and we got through kind of some of the insurance gymnastics, let's say, we lost two additional hurricane or say insurance companies, Bob, that we were relying on going forward for the next policies that we were going to get. So we used an insurance broker that was local to Florida that was able to find policies that were relatively close to what we had before. So you're talking about wind insurance, you're talking about flood insurance, and of course, homeowners insurance. And so you're trying to put those all together. But using a broker, which you can find on the internet, you can do a Google search and find a local, say, insurance broker that will help you find those companies, Bob, that are still in the game because the two companies that we lost, I believe one went bankrupt, frankly, after the Hurricane Ian situation. And the other one, frankly, Bob, left the area and did not want to do Southwest Florida anymore. So we had to enlist the help of another professional to kind of help us find those companies that were going to insure our homes so that when we have maybe Hurricane Debbie, like you said, coming around, Debbie being my first girlfriend in high school, obviously all kinds of bad memories there. Potential bad memories coming here as well going forward because I'm very worried about the Gulf, Bob. I'm worried about how warm the Gulf water is once we get out of that Sahara dust. I'm curious about how these storms will fire up in the Gulf of Mexico this year because, my goodness, that is like bathwater if it's ever been.
Hey, no question. By the way, we had that in common. My first girlfriend was Debbie as well. Like, uh-oh.
That is a very scary thing going for the future here.
It's like, man, this might not bode too well for people around South Florida. But let's talk about it for sure, because is there a difference with hurricane insurance coverage if you get hit by, let's say, a named storm or a non-named storm? Is there any kind of payout that's going to be different for you?
Shouldn't be too different depending on the policy, but certainly when it comes to FEMA, some of the disaster recovery insurance that's up there, Bob, is that depending on what the government assesses is how bad the storm was or how bad the impact was, local and state and national governments will depend on that assessment to determine how much they can dole out outside of the insurance companies so that if you get some very, very severe damage from a storm that is named, that is a very historical storm, typically there will be some back end from, say, your local government that could help you. But when it comes to the insurance policies, as long as it hits most of, say, the policy requirements or the policy delineants, you may be able to have no difference when it comes to how the policy is affected based on whether it's named or not. But obviously the government locally and nationally come into play when there tends to be a bigger disaster or a named storm like there was with Hurricane Ian a couple of years ago.
Yeah, that's a good point. I remember when Sandy came up and people are all up in arms that perhaps Sandy had lost its name about 3 hours before it made landfall down there in South Jersey. And I think that played a little problem with some of the insurance adjusters. So we're talking about that. So let's talk about away from that for a second. Flood insurance, Scott. A lot of people don't know that that's not automatically involved in your homeowner's insurance. You actually have to go out and buy flood insurance. A lot of people don't know this.
That's right. We talked about that, Bob. It's like you think you get a home insurance policy and you're all good to cover. I mean, wind, as I mentioned earlier, was another thing that was hurricane related that we had to get a separate policy on, Bob. So don't just think because you have home insurance, you're going to be all covered. You have to get these different, these little metrics that come into other policies that you need to have because when you're in a danger zone like we are in South Florida and Captiva and say that area, you need to have all these components of the insurance policy that end up working together. And they may even be with different companies, which has a little bit of a risk to it, because then you're relying on multiple kind of facets here to take care of you if there's a problem. But your point is well taken. You must have coverage when it comes to all say those things, when it comes to wind, flood, and homeowners, because as we know with these storms, they can do a lot of damage and they can make a lot of things really, really difficult for you after the storm goes by.
And it's easy to get flood insurance, right? I mean, it's not that hard to do.
Relatively, yeah. It depends on where you are and what's going on and what company you're working with and how much you want to spend. I mean, Bob, just a quick anecdote. We've seen our insurance company premiums for all those things, wind, flood, and homeowners, go up 2 to 3x since Hurricane Ian, and they've come down slightly, believe it or not, this year because we haven't had a storm there in the last couple of years. But as we know, the insurance companies have they have their ways to kind of do their numbers and everything like that, so they're not going to get ripped off, just like hopefully we don't. So work with the insurance company and work with the local brokers to make sure that that part of your coverage is taken care of and buttoned up.
You know, I've been noticing this too. I don't know the answer to this. It's just off the top of my head. Is there such a thing as a beach erosion insurance? Because we're watching all these beaches get chewed away. Some of them outside of New Jersey don't replenish the beaches. And we're looking at some big-time home sales up there in Nantucket because they're losing beach at a rapid pace. Can you insure yourself against beach erosion?
Some policies that will have those, say, accoutrements to it, if you will, to use a French word.
Right.
But there are parts that you have to do beach. You're going to have to do that yourself. And you're right, Bob. You know, Martha's Vineyard's another area, too, that's had a major amount of beach insurance. It's like, if there's one thing that's typical in life, it's death taxes and beach erosion.
Right.
So that's certainly a case out there all the time that everybody seems to be kind of aware of. And unfortunately, Bob, most of the folks that I know that are dealing with beach erosion are doing that kind of supplemental coverage on their own, meaning they're putting their own money in to help protect the beach, to help kind of reinstill the beaches as it were. And then hopefully that slows the erosion. But even that, man, is still something that's really challenging because that seems to be ever present everywhere these days.
Holy cow. Yeah, absolutely. So death taxes, beach erosion, and old girlfriend's named Debbie.
My goodness, we might be in some trouble here.
All right, when you come back into town, I got to get you on a show right here live. It's always fun for you. Fox Business Network contributor Scott Martin, thanks for joining me today on Fox Weather. I appreciate it, man. We'll talk to you soon.